Cruise news time, and I think we may be getting to the end of the age. Walrus people shaming cruisers. Also, a lot of people saying the price of cruising has increased. Well, it's been quantified, and you may be shocked to hear how much more expensive cruising is now than it was last year or a couple years ago. And a simple question: are cruise lines responsible for the behavior of their cruise passenger? Does bad passenger equal bad cruise line, or is it something else? Cruise news and my views. Let's talk about it. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Lido, Loca. I am your host, Tony, here with the latest cruise news and views for your face on October the 11th, 2023, a Wednesday. And wow, this the show, the stories, there's a lot of songs already popping off in my head, including "It's the End of the World as We Know It." Look, I don't think it's the end of the world, but it is interesting that we've got polar bear people and walrus people out protesting cruise ships. They're hitting a big target. The 200-passenger World Traveler cruise ship made a port call in Douarnenez, France, and that's when all of these folks showed up to protest, dressed as animals, and saying things like, "Shame on you," and "Get out, we don't want you here." Their big protest is about biodiversity. They think that the cruise industry should not exist at all, and of course they're making their voice heard. They did it in a pretty aggressive way, and you know, it's not the most pleasant thing if you're a tourist trying to get off in a tourist destination and all of a sudden you're being hassled by walrus people. I am you, you are me, we are we, and we are all together. I am the Eggman. I am the walrus. Shout out John Lennon, R.I.P. Shout out Ludacris. One of the things that certainly fascinates me about cruising and the cruise industry is, as a consumer of cruises, I can either think about things or not think about things. Sometimes we talk about, labor laws, our crew members getting paid what they should be paid as human beings. We can think about things like, is my vacation choice impacting the environment? Or we can just ignore all that and go on vacation. But it is interesting to me that cruising is one of these activities that I've been challenged with those things more so than almost anything else that I've done. I don't know. What do you think about these protesters? Do you give them like an A for creativity for dressing up like walrus people? Or do you think it's much ado about nothing? Leave a comment below. Cruise news story number 2, closely related. There is a movement going on in Sitka, Alaska. There's a group of concerned citizens there that would like to limit or eliminate cruise ships going to that cruise port. And the ultimate goal of this group is to get a referendum in front of the voting public there in Sitka to vote yay or nay whether or not they are feeling that cruise life. And well, the city has denied their petition to get a vote put in front of the people. It's such an interesting dynamic to study in all of these locations. Who's really in charge of balancing the good that cruises bring to a community versus the challenges that cruises bring to a community? Should it be the people who decide? Should it be the local governments that decide? What role should people who benefit commercially from cruising, the people that benefit from the tourism, how much say should they have in that conversation? We're seeing it play out in city after city where all of these things are being wrestled with. And well, at least in Sitka for now, the government says we'll continue to make these decisions. We're not going to put it to a vote of the people, but that could change going forward. Cruise news story number 3, just a quick update on how the conflict in Israel is impacting cruising. We've had 7 cruise lines come out and cancel port stops in Israel over the next 2 weeks or well into November. 7 cruise lines include Holland America Line, Celebrity Cruises, MSC Cruises, Norwegian Cruise Line, Regent Seven Seas, Oceania Cruises, and Celestial Cruises, all of them saying they will not be going to Haifa or to Ashdod into the near future. At least Celestial Cruises has said they will not go there at all in November. All these cruise lines are waiting to see what happens with the conflict there and whether there will even be a return to tourism in that area. yeah, it's a bad situation. It's a bad situation, of course, well beyond cruising. Bad situation for cruising, but there you go. Now let's talk a little bit about cruise and finance and cruise and price increase. The first story I want to share with you is Norwegian Cruise Line is attempting to raise $790 million so that they can pay down some of the debt that they acquired during the shutdown. As I've read this story, it seems more like a reorganization of their debt. All of these cruise companies took on debt during the shutdown, and at various times in the future, this debt is becoming due. And some of this debt it's not great debt. It's got really high interest rates, those kind of things. And so what you see from time to time is cruise lines trying to reorganize that debt. And that's what it feels like Norwegian is doing here, trying to raise the $790 million so that they can pay off some, sounds like debt that's coming due soon, or maybe reorganize some debt. But either way, that's the dance that continues to go on with these companies that took on so much debt during the shutdown. And another way that cruise companies are combating the debt that they have is they're increasing the price of cruises. I think all of us know that. We've talked about it almost ad nauseum, that we see the increase in prices. And well, recently that increase has been quantified. Cruise Critic has gone out there and done some research. They looked at some cruises in December, and what they found is that the price of cruising is more expensive than it was, surprise, in 2022, and then also in 2019. If we're looking back at 2022, prices have increased by 38% in just the last year as the demand for cruising has gone up. And then if you compare that to the pre-pandemic price back in 2019, prices are up 43% than what it was just a few years ago. It's an interesting situation for sure here in the United States, as you see all these measures in place trying to combat inflation, because people still have a decent amount of money to spend. So you see these incredible price fluctuations, but the demand for cruising is high. The demand for cruising at these higher prices is high. And of course, the cruise companies are going to take advantage of that to make sure they can make the most money possible, to pay down that debt, to be profitable. I got asked the question last night on the live show, do I think the prices will continue to increase? I certainly do, at least for the short term. If the supply of cruise inventory continues to fall short of the demand for cruising, then there's nothing else that can happen except continuation of high prices until it meets that breaking point, and then they're going to have to reduce their prices to fill up their cruise ships. But if cruise companies can keep charging higher and higher prices, and those cabins still continue to get booked, then those prices will continue to rise. Now, I'd like to have this conversation around the question of whether or not a cruise company is responsible for the bad behavior of their passengers. I offered a simple premise in my video yesterday. I said, because I had encountered mean people on Princess Cruise Lines, more so than I had on any other cruise line in my cruising experience, did that mean that Princess Cruises is the meanest cruise line? And rightfully so. I had several people push back and say, well, hey, that's not fair. Just because there's mean people on Princess Cruise Line, it doesn't mean that Princess Cruises is the meanest cruise line. And I want to get deeper into that, but let me first do this. Let me quickly invite you to subscribe. If you like staying up to date with everything going on in cruising, please consider subscribing with the notification bell on. That way you don't miss out on any of these episodes. Thank you in advance. Look, in full transparency, I put that premise out there because I'm interested to see how people think, because I've had a lot of exposure to the way that people react to stories and the way that people comment about stories. And let me give you this example that will soon become very obvious to you. Almost anytime I talk about bad cruise ship behavior on Carnival Cruise Lines, many people will attribute that to the brand Carnival itself. I'm not cruising on Carnival because Carnival promotes that behavior. And so it's funny to me that in a scenario like that, people will assign the responsibility of the behavior of their passengers to Carnival Cruise Line. But if you try to do the same thing with almost any other cruise line, then the pushback comes. And so I don't know what the answer is. Is it Carnival's fault that they have have people on there that have bad behavior? Is it Princess's fault that people on board exhibit bad behavior? Is it something about the product that they offer? Or is there just bad behavior in society and we should be slow to assign something negative to the cruise brand itself because of that behavior? I think that's something that we can certainly chew on. And then the other thing with yesterday's show that I want to mention quickly, a lot of people said that it was just geography, that I ran into mean people because I cruised out of New York. This was the second time I'd cruised out of New York. The first time I did a transatlantic over to Northern Europe, I didn't run into any mean people. And I've been on several cruises out of Florida where I've seen grumpy people that I described yesterday that cruised out of Florida. But I just thought it was interesting how people worked around that scenario yesterday. The people were mean because they were from New York, or the people, I don't know. You know, I think at the end of the day, there's just sometimes that people are grumpy, and sometimes people feel entitled to just share their grumpiness in a communal situation. As usual, there's no right or wrong answer to it. I just throw it out there really to challenge my own thought process and bias and let you guys do the same. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. I hope you enjoyed the show today. You can show your support by hitting the like button. This is Tony for Lido, Loca, and until the next time, we'll see you on the Lido. Bye. Cruise news, cruise news, cruise